Quiero comer if we don't transform the governance imposed and the rationale of the underlying power, this human rights like ourselves. So this is the problem. Their food process and their decisions around the food issue. This is a transformation which seeks to change, of course, the relationship between holders of obligations and holders of rights to materialize specific actions that are truly guaranteeing the right to food and, of course, the environmental rights and other rights, and, of course, which creates political awareness amongst social subjects. If this is possible, the transformations will go towards transformations that tackle political, social, and cultural, economic, and environmental determining factors that have conditioned all of these violations of human rights, of which, in addition, I must highlight hunger as merely one of them, one of the many spectrum of violations of the human right to food and food sovereignty. This change in the structures should, of course, allow us to be able to properly guarantee these rights and to fight against the different forms of oppressions and injustice. And I'm coming to the end of my presentation, and I'd like to remind you before I read the, the definition of people's food power. I'd like are truly democratic, based on human rights, that would allow them to make decisions on food related issues. But we also have that complexity that has to do with proper
really reduced the budget for public policies, and they also reduced the number of people that work in the state. So this new government of Mr. Lula, we received, it was a precarious situation in terms of budget and the political scenario with many divisions within the country and the strong parliamentary power, which is the most conservative one we have had in our history. So what do we do? First of all, the first steps that we made try to modify fiscal rules, budget, to work with the budget. We are doing that with the just legislative chamber, and we decided to take again the main programs. Brazil had experience with those programs, with the minimum salary, support to family farming. So those first months, that's what we did, and we began to take again new institutions, the Council for Food Security, when we talk about food sovereignty, and they have an active participation with a civil society. And they're 2/3 of civil society, a third of government. They're made up by a third of government, and it's located at the head of the. So it's to advise the president in terms of food sovereignty, food security, and related matters. We also have the chamber with 3 or 4 ministries involved. There's ministries that are part of this chamber. We have the government and the Council for Food Security. And what we are going to do at the end of the year, we're going to hold a conference on food security, which is a conference that gathers around 2,000 people. And it is built including the process of all Brazilian states. They all have, we have people from civil organizations who are part of this process, and we gather together to discuss guidelines and to fight against the hunger and to ensure food security in the country. And the councils, the interministry chamber, and we make up what we call the food security system, which is the system that is responsible for food security or food sovereignty in Brazil. Within that system, we also have instruments to participate with the different states and different municipalities. And as of them, we need to build agreements, enter into agreements to ensure food security. Now, the interministry chamber, they are devising a strategy to fight against hunger. But we also have some working tables or working groups to deliver things that we believe are very important. We have a group to address conflict of interest and how we can involve companies in terms of eradicating hunger. This is a big challenge that we have to respond to, and we are working with the Council on Food Security and Food Sovereignty. We have an international group that has been involved in the Brazilian processes in terms of food security, and we also have a working group to think about public procurement for peasant farmers or families and municipalities to broaden procurement to these families and to really tackle this and to be able to deliver these products to people that are affected in the country. So that's really our structure and how to fight hunger in our fight against hunger. And the chamber, the interministry chamber, and we call the CAIFA, we are trying to fight against hunger, and it brings together all the powers of the government and other powers of the different entities in Brazil. This big strategy that we are working on with different axes. The first one, it's about social profession. The second axis is to ensure adequate food and healthy food, because to build these proposals, we worked with previous experiences that we had in Brazil, that we had with the Brazil without misery, Brazil zero hunger. But I think we are right now, we have a we have a problem with obesity, and there's an environmental crisis related to food systems. So we have to eradicate hunger, but with a new paradigm, with an adequate food addressing this crisis, environmental crisis. That's a proposal also to reduce the inequality that we have, which is very strong in Brazil. So we are organizing ourselves to answer and to respond to these challenges, to ensure access to rent, to salary, to social protection. We have to overcome many challenges. But our first really challenge is a lot of people who are suffering hunger and poverty and who have no access to public policies. The second challenge that we have ahead of us is unemployment or informal work or very precarious work, lack of access to preferential systems. I don't know if you call them like that. I will ask somebody to help me with the vocabulary in Spanish. But another challenge that we have, public systems of Brazil in terms of health, food security, food sovereignty, they had been dismantled in previous years. So the fourth challenge is really to reduce the inequalities, which really is, we have addressed hunger in specific groups in different regions in Brazil. So to really tackle those challenges, we are working, we're increasing the minimum salary, which had not been increased for many, many years. We have a cadastral registry in Brazil, and we have the data of the poorest population in the country. So from this, we were able to include these people in public policy. We are reviewing that registry to ensure that people who really need that aid, they can be seen and they can be included in these public policies. We also included the process or the program of transparency, buying products from family peasants or family groups. And we are also thinking about how the government can to help the health system. Many times they are tackled with medicines, and the underlying cause is really hunger. So we have a group of actions in place to challenge, to address this challenge. The second axis that we had of our plan to the fight against hunger is education to consumers. The objective is to ensure the population that we need to have access to adequate and safe food with sustainable foods. And we have as a reference food guide from the Brazilian Federation that invites us to include in our daily intake more natural foods and to avoid UPPs. So there we have, again, some challenges to ensure adequate and healthy food. The first, it's due to the increase of lack of food, and which is quite evident in urban areas. We're talking about 33 million people who suffer hunger in Brazil, and they're around the main cities of the country, also in the northern region and northeastern region, and also in some households where they have women leaders or or the Black population. The second challenge is that in Brazil, we have a huge reduction in terms of farmland, and that has affected our biodiversity. The third challenge that we have to address to ensure adequate food is the impact of inflation on food, on the price of food. That it has happened around the globe. But in Brazil, we had this inflation around food products, and that increased the problem of hunger. Also, the problems of urbanization, the consumptions of healthy foods around urban areas. If we go to the favelas, where there's some Black group communities, they don't have natural products, or we don't have healthy products to offer these communities. We also have to provide access to the land. Brazil is one of the more unequal countries around the globe in terms of territory, so we have to provide that access to land. Also, we have to tackle the climate change, and also the challenge is the coexistence of malnutrition, obesity, even sometimes within these groups due to the consumptions of a high consumption of UPPs. And another huge challenge is Brazil, we consume a lot of fertilizers that are toxic, and that's why we opened new ministries, and we have a series of programs to tackle those challenges, to foster, for example, solidarity kitchens. People became organized around the peripheral areas of the cities, so community kitchens. And so we are trying to support this link of solidarity kitchens with family peasants that who buying the food for them. And we believe this will have an impact on food prices. We had to readjust the value of school food, which had not been adjusted for many, many years in schools. We have actions of agrarian reform, changing public policies for the production of food, to guarantee food security, access to public procurement, so indigenous communities can have access to these programs, and with not so much bureaucracy, access to water, and the agricultural policy. These are some factors that are there, so we can really know about the size of this program, of this access. And the third axis of this CAIXA, of this chamber, is participation and mobilization of civil society. When there was a coup, many of the programs were destroyed. A lot of the budget that had been allocated to that was not there anymore, and the popular reaction was not as strong as we expected it. So we believe that we have this institutional channel for participation to talk about these programs, how these programs can affect the hunger in the country. And also we need to mobilize other powers and other entities. So we are including civil society, to strengthen civil society organizations with the actions of the government, the civil society against hunger. And we're going to restructure this system of food security in the different states and different municipalities, so we can have a series of institutions enabling that Brazil can move away from this map, and we can do this from in a successful manner. And now to finish, it's very difficult to implement a program like this with a coalition government, but we are hopeful that we will be able to address and really implement all the actions that the government has to to overcome the fight against hunger. So we are working strongly with different systems and monitoring these programs and to achieve this as fast as we can and being able to overcome hunger as fast as we can in our country, in Brazil. So this is all I wanted to share with you. So thank you very much, Valeria, for your intervention. And with respect to the food governance that it has been a commitment in Brazil, Valeria will share about these challenges that the Brazilian government has in terms of food security and how right now in Brazil they are implementing new programs, fiscal policies, and fights against hunger, and also working closely with this council that has a significant participation from civil society. Valeria has also talked about some challenges that the country faces to ensure the right to food and food sovereignty. Thank you, Valeria. And so we ask the people that are with us, please leave your questions to Valeria in our Facebook or in our YouTube channel. So let us continue with our last panelist, our guest, Mabel Hurtado Vanegas and Edilma Toro Berrio.
Edilesa del corregimiento de Ciénaga de
Mabel is an assembly member where she represents rural and peasant women. From the age of 20, when she was displaced by violence, she started a life of leadership representing displaced persons from the city of Barranca Bermeja. Her fight has been against institutions demanding dignified life conditions, defending the countryside, native seats, and recovering food sovereignty. She fell in love with the purpose, engaged in being a true leader, raising her voice and doing as much as she can to contribute to the welfare of everyone. Common good. Mabel works together with the AMAME Association and the Baluartes Campesinos Nacionales institution, and she leads the strategy Soy Rural and the first council of peasant and rural women in the Middle Magdalena Valley region. We also have Edilma with us. She lives in a part of an area close to the Magdalena River. She's a proud rural leader who grows maize, plantain, yuca, beans, and some other products. Her struggle, it has to do with the acknowledgement of peasants as a subject of rights and the rights of peasant women. And she belongs to Semillas. She grows native seeds to ensure food sovereignty. She claims that if peasants, both men and women, don't grow the land, how are the cities going to be provided with food? Our contribution is instrumental to contribute to food sovereignty. She appreciates your participation today and anything that can help her continue with her undertaking in the countryside. Welcome, Marvel and Edilma. Good morning, everyone. It is truly a privilege to be here. But before speaking, we would like to introduce Samuel and Dr. Jimena Molina. Good morning from the city of Barranca Bermeja, from the province of Santander. For everyone around the world, it's a privilege to introduce Mabel and Vilma, two leaders from the rural area, peasants, who will talk about the wonderful process of their process. I'm the Secretary of Women and Family. The mayor, Alfonso Sassi, sends kind remarks and the acknowledgement to these women. As we heard earlier, their life is expressing the love for the countryside, food sovereignty, and everything that our country, our territory, the Middle Magdalena Valley region require. Introducing these two women is a privilege from the mayor's office because the rest of the world will get to know what they have done with the conviction of being women, peasant, rural women, which is reflected in the Council for Development of Rural Women. So I'd like to welcome these two women to participate in this very important seminar. Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Edilma Toro, and we uh, would like to give our contribution in favor of food sovereignty. For a long time, I believe more than 30 years, we have had the dream of participating in all of these different settings and scenarios. And so we started from the riverbank to start thinking about this, to see how we could come together and organize ourselves to be able to participate, to be able to raise our voices for the benefit of our territories and our women. And we started in 2019 when, for the first time ever, I got to know Delcy Becerra. Uh, she is a peasant, but from the district of Barranca Bermeja, she was starting to work, and our dream started to become a reality in 2020. FIAN Colombia came to Barranca Bermeja, and we started to come together to organize ourselves and to get to know how we could achieve food sovereignty, where we could leave junk food on the side, as well as industrialized products, and rather to improve our life scheme by doing what we know how to do, to grow the land, to plant the seeds, and to have our local native seeds planted. This is when we started this dream. And at the beginning, Juan Carlos said something that I like very much, which is people's food power. This, in our view, is of the utmost importance. The right to food and food sovereignty is our uh, language. It's something that we did not understand as peasants. When I heard this at the beginning, I was not understanding what it said. But actually, the right to food is a constitutional right that every human being is entitled to be able to take to their tables foods with dignity, necessary products. But food sovereignty is intended to give back to individuals the ability and the control and being able to choose what it is that they want to take to their tables. These are very similar words, but actually the content is of the utmost importance. As peasants, we would like to first thank God and, of course, the administration because they have supported us and guaranteed this whole process that we started from our rural areas. In fact, the institutions have been backing us. Progress has been made significantly for us as a rural community, which is Law 131 of 2002, which establishes the support to women through the National Council for Rural Development and subnational councils. We sometimes forget that institutions play a very important role and allow us to participate as peasants, creating us as subjects of rights. Our institutions are helping us and showing us that they are taking us into account through a decree, Decree 569 of November 29, 2022, which established the Council for Development of Rural and Peasant Women as a participation instance in the district of Barranca Bermeja. What does this mean? Our Secretariat of Agriculture, Fishing, and Rural Development is considering us through a wonderful strategy which is called Soli Rural, which is telling us that if we don't uh, understand the legal aspects, we cannot aspire to accomplish better benefits for our families, for the standard of living of everyone. So, as peasants, we have been uh, structuring an organization for that purpose. We would like to thank everyone for this. I leave you with Mabel. From the Soy Rural strategy, we have been able to train ourselves. We had the opportunity as well through the Council of Rural and Peasant Women held on November 11 last year. Well, we started November last year, but this year, 2023, we were able to consolidate the council. The mayor, Mr. Alfonso, supported our dream, and he allowed us to work on this framework, on this council, where we are identified as assembly members, as leaders, as female leaders in our territories. As a result of this, our dreams have been fulfilled. I also wanted to add, remember that on March 8th, 2023, this current year, there was a meeting, a conversation with Dr. Paola Romero, the coordinator of projects within FIAN, and Bessie Becerra, as well our director of the Soy Rural Strategy, Luz Amparo Vasquez, and Gina Ortega. They, as part of this conversation and meeting, they left us with a very important lesson learned, which is that as peasant and rural women, and leading the productive and social development of our territory to encourage the holistic development and welfare of our communities. So we truly wanted to thank FIAN Colombia because they are walking together with us towards this goal. These are new experiences for us. You may see that I'm a bit nervous, but of course, this is new for us. But we wanted to leave you with a clear message, a message of love, which is that we, as peasants, we represent mostly women, but in any case, including men as well. We are responsible, first of all, for for wanting to have land that we can work. We have a wonderful house where we hold seeds. We would be, of course, responsible for sharing, protecting, or being the guardians and of this, and selecting and reproducing and preserving our local and native seeds. This is our culture. This is what our ancestors gave us. And this is what we are fighting for, to be able to contribute to improving the standard of living and the enjoyment of the rights of peasant and rural women in our wonderful district of Barranca Bermeja. Coming together with the communities of the 6 villages, empowering them on the basis of trust, discipline, perseverance, empowerment of our girls, or strengthen organizations, mm, making this council of rural and peasant women more dynamic, social planning, productive planning, and citizen participation. What you see here is a set of photographs of our meetings where we learn and we teach. Well, we don't teach much, we learn more. We talk about empowerment of leaders, mostly in their own communities. They are identified as leaders, and we, as peasants, as rural women, we lead social and productive planning on our territory, mm, making sure that our children don't leave the region to study elsewhere. Of course, it's good for them to study, but they should come back if they leave. They should learn how to love the land as we have, that they have a sense of belonging to the land, that they know that if peasants leave their territories, of course, there will be no products produced properly, because as long as they travel long distances with fruits and vegetables, the products are damaged, whereas we produce them directly from our territories, it would be better for our cities. With the rural association called Eco Campesino, we have been strengthening our women to be legally organized based on legal organizations so that we have the right to demand to be able to be elected. Because if we are not part of the legal framework, it will be very difficult for the government to help us. We should organize ourselves on the basis of different associations. This is why we're now part of the Eco Campesino organization, the Amame organization, an organization of Afro descendants from the Middle Magdalena Valley region within a legal framework. We are hoping to be part of these organizations as assembly members, council members, and we would like to move forward by joining our efforts to ensure full and effective participation of women based on equal conditions with opportunities of leadership. Everything based on social, political, and productive and organizational frameworks. This is our organization. We have fishermen, artisanal fishing, cattle raising, farmers. We come from the Middle Magdalena Valley region. So, Eco Campesino is our organization. This is our wonderful association. The first meeting of the Council for Development of the Peasant and Rural Women started on March 11, 2023. First, on a national level, we are pioneers. We are the first to create this wonderful council for the development of rural and peasant women. Organizational strengthening of the organization of peasants, Eco Campesino, came about based on the dream that we are not only ourselves working on this, but that the municipality or the district of Barranca Bermeja, no one is excluded. We are a team where we can move forward with young people. They go to the cities after studying. They don't want to come back to our territories because they don't find job opportunities or employment opportunities. So with this organization, it will strengthen our young people to go study and come back, to become as professionals, to come back to our territories, to our rural zones. We have 10,000, more than 10,000 families. And, and our purpose is to strengthen citizen participation to lead the social and productive planning process in our region. We are the driving force behind our families and the fundamental pillar of peasant and rural communities. We are unstoppable and tireless. We are the maximizers of our potential. We care for our seeds. We are fighters and warriors with respect to public policies. so that our rights are honored and that we are seen as subjects of rights. The Association of Peasant and Afro-Descendant Women of Amame, that's the name of the organization. You can see them here on the photograph. This is just a small group, but we have many more women belonging to this association. They make a lot of noise. They are beautiful women. Amame has a unique feature, which is that it comes from the Middle Magdalena Valley region as well. They are implementing strategies intended to carry out productive projects that may contribute to enhance our standard of living. This is a project that has to do with protecting our food efforts. This is a project conducted with Paola Romero, Betsy Becerra, Luz Amparo, and Gina. We had already mentioned them. They are truly carrying out a wonderful job. They are teaching us and also uh, uh, food care is something that you don't say. It's a type of undertaking where apparently this doesn't count, but they are teaching us that together it may be important. Together we can not only learn, but also teach and teach those women not only to raise their voices, but teach them as well to be heard and to come together by joining their voices. On this slide, what you see is a meeting where we have been discussing the different processes supported by FIAN Colombia throughout the 4 years that we have been working as part of the administration and as leaders. And it has truly been extremely productive because it was difficult for us to be behind a screen and to speak and to know that no one was hearing us. But being here talking to you, although we know that some of you are far away, but you are paying attention to what we're saying, it is truly a way to say thank you to you. Thank you to Dr. Paola for believing in us. Thank you for wanting to help us to be successful, to come through with these initiatives. We can only say that we are extremely proud and satisfied because we know that we can count on these women here and far away are willing to lend their time to help us ensure that we learn. And here in Barranca Bermeja, we are supported by the administration as well, the mayor, by his administration, willing at all times to support us together with Jimena Molina, who is available 24/7 as well as Dr. Betsy. All of these women who were willing to help us, to who, who gave us their assistance. The whole team was very useful. For us, being here is a blessing. The appointment of rural and peasant council women of the district was a dream come true. After 30 years of thinking about how to organize ourselves today, we now have a dream fulfilled. More than half of that dream has already been fulfilled. Edilma and Mabel, you only have 1 minute left before we finish. We're close to the end in any case. Before we finish our presentation, I would like to ask our courageous peers who encourage us to be here we would like to ask them to introduce themselves. We would like to thank our Secretary of Agriculture, Mr. Samuel Carvajal. Thank you so very much because he has been willing to help us. It was also possible to carry out the farmers market. It was wonderful thanks to our Secretary of Agriculture and to our peers who are behind us, our friends. They are joining us so that you can see their faces. Thank you very much.
Aquí estamos. Muchas gracias.
So thank you very much.
Muchas gracias a ustedes, Edilma.
Thank you to you, Edilma, Mabel, all of you.
Caluroso saludo.
Thank you, a warm hug from here. Thank you for being with us. And thank you to all the other officials that helped out in this program. Edilma and Mabel have shared their beautiful and wonderful experience of rural and peasant women of Barrancabermeja, and how this initiative, which is really the people's food power for women, and they have their first peasant council for women, and this is a participative instance that makes decisions in the district of Barrancabermeja, and it has become an institution now. So they have also shared their experience of peasants, Association of Magdalena Medio, and some very valuable reflections on the food process. Thank you to all these women that are with us today. And now we will talk about the questions that have been shared in our different networks. We begin with the first question, which is addressed to Juan Carlos Morales. Juan, the question is, what is the architecture that you suggest should be restructured or created at national level to ensure the right efforts to ensure that people's food power? This is an interesting question. The proposal of the people's food power, it's not the only thing. It's really what we would like to take the control of those governance mechanisms. That's one of the main things, but not the only one. In this regard, for the person who asked the question, with respect to this draft or this bill to implement this right, which is something that has been agreed in the Havana Agreement, we propose that this should be in parity, which at central level, at national level, but also at the territorial and sub-territorial level. Decision structures should include state officials with the same number of holders of rights, so representatives on social organizations, etc. And in none of those spaces, we should have people who violate the rights or who gain money. And that's, for us, it's really important, because those would like to be opportunistic in terms of this food sovereignty or food security, those decision spaces, those people that violate human rights should not be there. So we have proposed mechanisms in parity, both at national level and sub-territorial level. And in fact, with Article 216 in the National Development Plan, that was also addressed. And so we are also working hard. So in the few hours remaining from the legislative process that have approved in the last debate, this progressive to have pass this law, or it would be a wrong strategic move for this government not to approve this, and to think we need to have a law, a framework law to establish the guidelines, which does not only include the architectural guidelines, but coherent construction and mechanisms for public policy. And I would like to finish with something additional, Andrea. Those participation systems are not only formal, these are systems where people have the right to vote. not only to listen to, but to vote, and of course, to develop or to devise public policies or actions and to implement actions. Otherwise, it would be just a participation and we would know exactly who that would benefit. Thank you, Juan. Now we have a question for Valeria. What recommendations would you have for the Colombian government to begin or to start a similar process?
Parto de nuestra experiencia y creo que hay
It's part of our experience. I think there's a difference, but something here that has been vital when the system has been created to ensure the right to food. The first institutional framework has been the Council for Food Security that had civil society as a majority. So I think this council was really important, and it has been the first component of the system because it was really setting the pace for the creation of other institutions called like the interministry chamber. That doesn't really protect us from many other aspects that we need to address, but I think the participation of civil movements, of peasants, urban movements, Black people's movements, researchers, for example, I think they are the ones that have really how we should create a food security policy and the institutional framework. Of course, we all face many challenges, but I think this was a political point or a political aspect that was paramount. So that was a way of beginning this dialogue with civil society. So I think that would be the first step, and it's really important. Thank you, Valeria. Now we have some questions for Dilma and Mabel. What difficulties have you faced to fulfill the bureaucratic requirements to establish yourself as an organization, and what could be done to overcome these requirements? It has been quite difficult and quite complex because in our society we have a lot of male chauvinism, but multiply them by 3 in our peasant world. So it's quite complex, it's quite difficult when to organize ourselves, to go out, to train ourselves. And that, of course, makes our leadership action a bit more difficult within our territory. So it hasn't been easy, but God has given us or people, they're humble people, they have been brought to our path, they don't make us feel different. And that gives us the strength and the ability to continue driving and working forward, especially in my case, for example, in the river basin. We have also a lot of biodiversity, but we have many children, young people, women who have no possibilities. So these really, we know that we need to do something. We do not have a lot of knowledge. Maybe we don't have, we don't have the training, we haven't studied, but we have that sense of belonging for a region, and we have our own self-esteem, and that makes us want to move forward. What would we like to improve, or an opportunity for things to be easier, to have more willingness from the government side, to really enable the way in which we can establish ourselves, because so many times there's, just to submit a document, it's so difficult. There are so many requirements, and that doesn't allow us or it makes it a bit more difficult for us to be able to be properly established as an organization.
Muchas gracias a las dos.
So thank you to both of you. The next question,
La de el ser mujeres.
being women,
llevado a la hora de
what has it meant when you claim your rights? Have you felt that you have been treated differently? Yes, of course. Yes, of course. When I'm going to talk about my own surroundings. When you come from my communities and I come to the meetings, I'm not dressed exactly the same as I am dressed at home. So men begin to say, so where are you going? Why do you go out so much? What are you going to do? So you really realize that this male chauvinistic it's greater in our surroundings, in our communities. But we are happy, we are thrilled about our process as a peasant woman, and to really teach our girls and provide them with that empowerment. And it really doesn't matter how male chauvinistic they are, and you know how chauvinistic our peasant community is, but we need to move forward and we need to show that really if we come together, we can be big and purpose and fulfill our purpose. Thank you very much. So we still have 2 more questions. One question for Edilma and Mabel, and the next one for Juan Carlos. So do you believe that the decision mechanisms and policies for the right to food are enough? And do they ensure effective participation? No, I don't. Yes, at least we write, we have law 731 and the decree that has been created for us. It's wonderful. There was also a UN declaration in December 2018, which was really important for us as peasants, but we need more. We need more. We need, for example, we as peasants, we feel that need, we see that need, and you know, as professionals that we still have that need, and we thank your support because we still have a long way to go. And more so when participation is being requested in Bogota, I'm part of the Association of Peasants at national level, and all those policies are in Bogota. So for us, we don't have sometimes the resources to go to Bogota, and so we haven't been able to participate a great deal. Thank you. Thank you too. And now Juan, now to complete this session of questions and answers, please. We have a question for you. If dialogue restricts companies that violate human rights, but they do have political influence, what happens to governance, for example, especially in this government? When we've addressed and talked about this issue, not only here, but in different parts of the world, part of the businesses, the world that is not related to crimes, but in a few weeks we've seen that many paramilitaries talked about food businesses that were related to criminal activities. So those companies that do not have that criminal profile, or at least that they haven't been proven yet, they maybe could participate in dialogue scenarios just to achieve maybe some sort of guidance or support. But that participation may not influence the decisions that should be made by the people who are subjects of human rights, who are the holders of the rights. No one denies that what is inadmissible is that in an emergency situation, they earn money, taking advantage of their participation or being them the ones that configure or devise the special assistance provided to the government, or the private sector is the one that operates standards that civil organizations or rural peasant communities should be working on, especially when they are working on food security and food sovereignty. Those are things that should not be allowed to happen. And now governance, part of the problems that we face really, one of the food problems really have to do with the maneuver space that has been granted to these industrial sectors. If we want to overcome our current situation, we need to tackle the problem head on, and we need to defy those who have led the country to this current situation. So we can't continue waiting. The last survey conducted, the World Survey on Food, only it's a very low standard in Colombia. We, are the percentage of people who have access to the right foods. It's very low. So we need to have a sovereign position as a country and really to build this people's food power so they don't decide over our own food process. Thank you, Juan. And thank you again to Mabel, Edilma, to Valeria for being with us in this second block. Now to close this block, food sovereignty, we've seen with everything that we have shared today, the main objective is to provide to the holders of right the control, those subjects of rights, the control of what they want to take, what they want to eat, what they want to bring to their table. So there are many challenges that we need to face in terms of the real and effective participation. We see how the experience of Brazil has been able to generate mechanisms around this food process. These mechanisms are democratic, they are participative, but they do have challenges. The experience of Brazil has been valuable to consolidate these mechanisms, and it would also be vital to generate these scenarios for decision-making in Colombia. The Eco and Amame peasant communities, these women with their people's food power on women is a pioneer organization in terms of their planning for food, and through that council for peasant women and rural women, we can generate those specific instances for the decision-making process and to really implement that people's food power for women. So we will now continue to the second block. Thank you. Thank you, Andrea. And before the second block, we will have a 10-minute recess over rural YouTube. This is an initiative that began in 2019 to the human right for food. So we will see the first chapter of the third the theories of panela. We go through the Department of Santander to learn about the panela, other sugarcane bread. And then we will see the third chapter of this series, where we will visit Carmen de Bolívar and Montes de Maria, especially the municipality for their artisan production of panela. This is really a resistance group, and so we will meet again in 10 minutes. And this is the presentation.
Gloria Batista, del equipo de comunicación rural, OPS de María y en esta tercera edición de YouTube Rural, estaremos hablando de la panela, el alimento que endulza tu vida. En esta temporada también estaremos aprendiendo la importancia de este alimento para los colombianos. Esta vez nos encontramos en Mogote, municipio panelero del departamento de Santander. También iremos a Cartagena y María a aprender todo sobre la panela. Y también de cómo esta hace parte de la cultura y resistencia de estas regiones. Acompáñame a este nutritivo e interesante recorrido. Me encuentro en la plaza principal de Mogotes, esta tierra que es cuna de la revolución comunera y las luchas libertadoras, pero también una tierra con gran vocación agropecuaria, con cultivos de caña, café, frutales y pique principalmente, pero donde la caña panelera y la panela constituyen un renglón importante en la economía de la región. Bueno, y como estoy para vivir la experiencia completa, me he venido a una finca a aprender cómo se siembra la caña. Entonces, unas mujeres maravillosas me lo van a enseñar. Acompáñame.
Más o menos estamos nosotras las mujeres saliendo a trabajar a este oficio, porque más antes nos desempeñábamos era en la cocina, ya la mujer no tenía como esa libertad de salir a trabajar, ¿sí me entiende?
Entonces, hasta ahorita nos estamos dando cuenta que podemos también hacer estos trabajos, pero hay hombres que a pesar de todo no quieren entender que las mujeres tenemos muchas capacidades, no solamente cocinar, criar niños. Y esto pues nos da una gran ganancia. Por ahí podemos salir, trabajar, ganar algo para no estar dependiendo de realmente organizaciones de mujeres, digamos, no las hay hasta el momento. Cada quien va siendo consciente de la necesidad de no estar dependiendo de alguien, ¿sí? Porque eso incrementa mucho la violencia intrafamiliar, porque cuando uno depende del esposo, por lo general, pues eso trae muchas consecuencias.
La caña que se utiliza para producir la panela se cultiva en alrededor de 511 municipios del país, lo cual corresponde a 28 de los 33 departamentos de Colombia. Los departamentos de mayor influencia productiva son Boyacá, Cundinamarca, Cauca, Antioquia, Santander, Nariño, Valle del Cauca, Tolima, Caldas, Norte de Santander, Risaralda y Huila, donde se concentra el 83% del área productiva. Hay conformadas 276 organizaciones en Colombia. Panela está presente en 14 departamentos. Nancy, cuéntanos qué es el despajado y qué implicaciones tiene esto.
Bueno, el despajado es quitarle las hojas secas a la mata. También se le hacen 2 despajes durante su tiempo. El primer despaje es para el follaje y el crecimiento y el segundo es para el engruesor y luego se madura.
Perfecto. Pero, ¿con qué tiempo se hace eso? ¿El primer despaje se hace al cuánto tiempo?
A los 8 meses.
¿Y el segundo?
A los 14 meses.
La panela es un alimento que sirve como endulzante, hace parte del grupo de los azúcares, pero a diferencia del azúcar blanco y del azúcar de mesa, que solo aportan calorías, esta conserva muchísimos nutrientes para beneficio de nuestra salud, como el calcio y el hierro, lo que la convierte en un alimento nutritivo para nosotros. Bueno, chicas, cuéntenme qué ocurre con las personas que tienen cultivo de caña o que son aparceros, pero no tienen dónde procesarla. ¿Qué ocurre con ellos?
Ellos buscan un trapiche y pagan el costo. Y entonces el dueño del trapiche le recoge la caña cuando ya la tienen lista. Pero a veces es esto, buscan trapiches y cerca, pero entonces de pronto el costo es más caro, más costoso. Porque entonces por eso ellos van y los llevan a otros trapiches que el costo es más barato.
Bueno, algo que hemos descubierto aquí en Mogotes es que hay una señora que prepara unas aromáticas, lo que nosotros conoceríamos como aromáticas, pero es que de verdad esta tiene magia. Su nombre es
Sandra Milena Solano López.
Ok, señora Sandra, entonces enséñenos qué tiene por aquí y qué vamos a preparar con él.
Entonces el procedimiento es colocar a hervir el agüita, pero las vamos a preparar con panela. La albahaca es un relajante y el bálsamo es para los nervios. Entonces ellas se pueden combinar y así sucesivamente se hace la infusión y se deja ahí y ya en 5 minuticos podemos tomar. Bueno, ahora sí los invito entonces a disfrutar de esta deliciosa aromática.
Esto ha sido todo por este primer capítulo de la tercera temporada de Tu YouTube Rural. Nos vemos en la siguiente experiencia en Cartagena, Bolívar. Y recuerda consumir panela como alimento natural y con ello apoyar a las familias campesinas que se dedican a la producción de esta. Te espero en nuestro próximo capítulo. ¡Chao, chao! soy Gloria Batista del equipo de comunicación rural OPS Montes de María y este es el tercer capítulo de tu youtuber rural. Venimos desde Cartagena hasta los Montes de María, específicamente hasta el Carmen de Bolívar, un municipio caracterizado por su biodiversidad y su gran riqueza agrícola. Hoy estaremos en el Jobo, un corregimiento conocido por su gran producción panelera. Históricamente el Jobo producía el 70% de la panela que se consumía en el municipio, con más de 8 trapiches artesanales y una gran producción de panela generaba empleo a muchas personas en el territorio. Desafortunadamente, muchos de estos trapiches debieron ser cerrados por falta de garantías en la comercialización. Hoy estaremos conociendo una maravillosa experiencia de resistencia en los Montes de María. Compartiremos con Marlene, una mujer que se ha dedicado toda su vida a la producción de panela. Acompáñame. Buenas. Qué rico, huele a panela. Hola Marlene, ¿cómo vas?
Hola, bien, bien, bien. ¿Y tú?
Bien, muy bien. También aquí encantada de todo lo que nos vas a enseñar y todo lo que vamos a aprender contigo hoy.
Me alegro,
Entonces, cuéntanos qué vamos a hacer.
Bueno, aquí vamos a hacer un guarapo de panela.
Cuéntanos cómo ha sido el proceso de resistencia en cuanto a en los momentos en los que se ha puesto difícil la cosa, cómo ha sido seguir produciendo panela a pesar de la situación.
Bueno, yo desde que mi esposo murió quedé encargada con mi hijo aquí en la trapichera. No la hemos dejar de caer porque es una producción muy buena, porque con eso levanté todos mis hijos y todos mis nietos también. Entonces queremos seguir adelante para que no se acabe esta tradición.
Bueno, y ahora que nos terminemos este delicioso guarapo, nos vamos con Juan Pérez a conocer el cultivo de caña. Nos encontramos en la trapichera, el lugar donde se transforma la caña en diferentes variedades de panela y otros derivados. Estamos aquí con María Camila, que nos va a estar compartiendo un poco qué significa para ella este espacio.
Bueno, para mí significa mucho porque aquí nací, aquí me he criado y esto es una tradición que viene desde antes de mis abuelos, de mi bisabuelo. La caña tiene diferentes tipos de procedimientos. Bueno, se saca la panela, se saca el melado, se hacen para viejos, melcochas, batidos, panela de coco.
María Camila, cuéntanos qué sientes tú, qué crees tú, qué diferencia esta trapichera de las otras, qué es lo que los hace distintos.
Bueno, acá lo que nos hace distinto es que esta es una panela orgánica, que no lleva nada de químico, todo viene de lo natural.
Se reconoce la producción de la panela como una actividad agrícola que se realiza en trapiche y cuyo fin es la producción de la panela y mieles vírgenes para el consumo humano. Esta ley habla de la exportación del Fondo para el Fomento Panelero, como también tiene en cuenta los sitios de producción y las personas que se encargan de esta actividad. Ahora, nos surge una pregunta. ¿Esta ley ha sido realmente un apoyo para las familias que viven de la producción panelera? Esta ley habla de la exportación del Fondo para el Fomento Panelero y tiene en cuenta los sitios de producción, como también a las personas que se dedican a esta actividad. Y nos surge una duda. ¿Están realmente estas leyes siendo beneficiosas para las personas que se dedican a la producción de panela? Ahora sí, María Camila, explícame cómo tengo que empacar.
Bueno, mira, aquí tomas la hojita y la vas envolviendo.
Cuéntanos, ¿qué crees que hace falta para cumplir las metas previstas, lo que se han trazado en este tiempo?
Bueno, nosotros queremos a futuro, o sea, lo que queremos es una empresa para generar empleo, pero bien organizada, que el producto tenga registro de INVIMA, entre otras cosas que se requieren para tener la empresa bien organizadita.
Bueno, gracias María Camila por enseñarme a empacar, por toda la información que me has compartido.
Ok, mamá, a la orden, cuando quieran pueden regresar, saben que este es un producto orgánico, campesino de acá de nuestra región.
Perfecto, y ya yo puedo ser contratada porque me quedó. Les invitamos a seguir fomentando el consumo de la panela por encima de endulzantes artificiales que pueden afectar su salud. Prefiere alimentos reales como la panela, que consumidos con moderación nutren y endulzan tu vida. Gracias por acompañarnos en esta bonita experiencia. Recuerda que al consumir panela campesina estás apoyando procesos de mujeres luchadoras y de familias que dependen de esta actividad. Por otro lado, al hacerlo también estás contribuyendo a la formación sana de tus hijos y a su buena alimentación. Esto ha sido todo por esta tercera temporada de Tu Youtuber Rural. Recuerda continuar conectado con nosotras y nosotros a través de nuestras redes sociales porque se vienen muchísimas sorpresas. Y recuerda, consume panela campesina que te da mucha energía.
Muchas gracias por continuar acompañándonos en
Thank
este
you
encuentro
very much. Join us.
Thank you for being
People's
with
food
us
power, right to
in
food
this
and food
our
sovereignty.
rural
And the
YouTuber
rural
show that I think
YouTuber
that represents panela
talking
representing
about
our culture
vanilla
as real
culture and
food with
real
a lot
food
of
with narrative,
nutritional energy
with
that left
energy,
many,
which
well,
gave us a
gave us a
lot
lot of
of
food for thought. Let us remember that hunger and
energy to
malnutrition
continue with
are
this.
just some of the
These are many.
expressions of violations to the right to food and food sovereignty. Having said this,
Having said
then
this,
it
we
begs
have
the
this
question,
question.
the
The
actions
actions
that are
required
required
to
to
tackle
combat
these
these two
two
problems,
problems,
could they be
may
foreign to
they
the
be
focus of human
b-
rights? And
far
maybe,
from the
and can
human
they
rights
be
approach? May
developed
they
without the
be developed without
participation
the
of
participation
those
of
who
those who
are
are
holders
holders
of
of human
human
rights? In other
rights,
words,
the
people
people that
who
suffer for these
suffer because of
conditions,
these
but also
conditions,
for
but
the
also
people who have the
those
possibility
who have the
to
possibility to
recover
recover
their
their ways of
life
living
and their
and the
dignity
dignity
through
of right
adequate
food.
food processes.
To talk about
To
these
talk
questions,
about these
we will now
questions, we're
start
going to continue
block
with the
two
second
called
block,
strategies
named
of fight
Strategies
against
Against
hunger
Hunger,
and
Malnutrition.
malnutrition,
So we
where our
have the
moderator will be
facilitator, Professor
Gustavo Andrés Ariel Giraldo,
Gustavo
who
Andrés
I would
Giraldo,
like
who
to
I
welcome at
welcome.
this point.
Gustavo is
Gustavo
a
is a
dietist nutrition
nutritionist with a
from a
master's
master's
degree and doctoral degree in the area of nutrition
and
and postdoctoral degree
a
on nutritional
PhD.
epidemiology.
And he's
He is
currently
a
the teacher of the
professor and
University of
researcher at
Antioquia
Universidad
in
de Antioquia
topics
on
related
issues
to the
relative to
consumption of
consumption of food
food at
at
the
the level of
population
the
level within the
population within the
frameworks
framework of
of systems
food
and
systems and patterns and
food
their
processes,
impact on
food
the
patterns,
cooking
and
universe,
their
health,
impacts
illness,
in
considering the
the
many
kitchen, health,
biopolitical
illnesses,
context,
considering the
social and
different
environmental,
biopolitical
commercial and
contexts,
cultural context. Welcome, Professor
socio-environmental context,
Gustavo.
commercial and cultural context.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to take this opportunity to thank FIAN Colombia for inviting me to be a part of this international seminar on people's food power, which is absolutely necessary in Colombia, where the different ways of knowledge on food issues is respected. I will be facilitating this space until 12:40. Milena already gave us the name, Strategies Against Malnutrition and in Favor of Food, including the participation of Angela Marcela Gordillo from FAO Colombia, Mariana Santarelli from FIAN Brazil, Ruben Ernesto Orjuela from the ICBF, Colombian Welfare Institute, and Jolis Correa from the zones of rural reserves in Colombia. So to start, we will hear from Dr. Angela Marcela Gordillo. Go ahead, please. She is here, yes. Angela Marcela is a nutritionist with a master's degree in political studies at the National University with an experience of more than 10 years on public policies, plans, and projects related to food sovereignty. She has been a professor and researcher in public policies based on a human rights approach with experience on planning and management of projects on people's education around the issue of food. And she currently works as consultant in the area of food and fight against malnutrition within FAO Colombia. Angela, it's a pleasure. Please go ahead. You have 20 minutes. Good morning. I would like to thank FIAN Colombia for the kind invitation to attend this important seminar. I hope to contribute reflections for the discussion taking place today within this session. I will do this from a perspective based on the transfers related to the food issue in Colombia. I'm going to work on four main elements. An outlook on the National Development Plan, transfers, the opportunities of transfers as a way to tackle hunger from what is established in the National Development Plan, Thirdly, I would like to share some challenges. If they are not taken into account, they will continue increasing the violations of the right to food. And I will wrap up with some final reflections based on my presentation. Monetary and in-kind transfers are our social protection measures adopted by the states to overcome poverty and hunger. Even though these measures have made it possible to control poverty and a quick relief in the country, it is now where the current government plays at the center of its public agenda, food as a right and it's important to strike a balance between opportunities and challenges existing today with the use of this measure. Although it is not necessary, it is possible to make adjustments that enable to limit its scope within the framework of guaranteeing the right to food and to incorporate human rights-based approach within this commitment within the transfer system. As we will see, it has been included in the National Development Plan currently in force. So to start off very quickly, let's look at transfers within the National Development Plan. You are able to see that overall, this is included in four articles of the law. First, we find Article 65, which creates the system of transfers under the coordination of Prosperidad Social. It establishes two types of transfers: monetary transfers, which may be conditioned or non-conditioned, and number two, in-kind transfers. As you can see here, it specifically mentions that they will be geared towards guaranteeing the right to food for the impoverished and extreme poverty population, and based on a human rights approach with the participation of community and popular economy. And Article 66, it creates the Citizen Income Program. If it says that on December 31st, they must have harmonized monetary condition and non-condition transfer programs. And it also mentions that the amount of these transfers must be based on certain characteristics of the population, such as way of life, the zone where they live, and the makeup of the households. In Article 67, it creates transfer of resources called zero hunger, where again, it says that it is intended to guarantee the right of the population in a condition of poverty and extreme poverty, and again mentions the human rights-based approach and the participation of peasant economies, community economies, and popular economies. And finally, in Article 216, it creates the Zero Hunger Program, which will be part of the national policy to progressively guarantee the right to food, and it adds a paragraph defining that the Zero Hunger Program will coordinate the follow-up and monitoring system for overcoming hunger and malnutrition, the 10-year breastfeeding program, public procurement, public and private partnerships, recovery areas in regarding nutrition, coordinated by the Colombian Welfare Institute and the Zero Hunger transfer led by Prosperidad Social, mentioned in Article 67. From this information provided by the National Development Plan, I would like to move on to mention some of the opportunities available, which I feel are at the disposal of the government if they actually want to incorporate a human rights-based approach to contribute to fulfilling the right to food in Colombia. There is an offering of different transfer programs, monetary and in kind, in Colombia, which should be reformulated. Social protection reports from OECD and from the National Labor Organization have said that the challenges regarding social protection not only take place in terms of coverage and quality, but that they must be adapted to truly meet the specific needs of the territories and the populations living in throughout the country, coordinated with other structural measures that will make it possible to overcome poverty and hunger, among many other problems. Transfer programs also have the opportunity today to be adapted to incorporate strategies and instruments that truly enable bridging social gaps and gender-based inequalities. For instance, those the advancement experiences of transfers in kind uh, for women for agricultural projects, which are combined with proposals, for instance, of in, while their children are under their protection. There are also several experiences that have been documented where the delivery of monetary transfers to women have evidence better results in poverty and hunger than when they are given to men. All the transfers are targeted towards urban and rural populations. I'd like to emphasize the rural population, considering that historically speaking, it has been mostly affected by hunger, food insecurity, confinement, armed conflict, among many others. This is why social protection measures, monetary and in-kind transfers should include interventions which are structural, allowing people devoted to family, community, peasant, and ethnic agriculture have access to productive factors such as land, water, infrastructure, insurance with respect to the loss of their crops, actions linked to managing climate risk, the delivery and the use of native and local seeds, and organizational strengthening, among many other aspects. If social protection to peasants communities is improved, they may be part, for instance, of those initiatives of local public procurement where food for the case of products delivered through in-kind transfers. This will make local economies much more dynamic as well autonomy and food sovereignty processes in their territories. And it is also the possibility to offer fresh and real products produced harmoniously on their territories, which would enable the availability, access, and consumption of a nutritional diet which is culturally and environmentally adequate, which is based on fulfilling the right to food. Taking into account the National Development Plan, when it says that in-kind transfers should be based on a human rights approach, although human rights principles should then be guiding the adjustments to transfer programs. This is why it's so important to allow active social participation on a national and subnational level. This should take place, it should be included in the design and implementation and surveillance and oversight of these transfer programs to meet what has been established in the programs to be able to demand transparency, accountability from the organizations in charge, and to request the adjustments needed with respect to the ever-changing dynamics currently in place in the territories. This will allow interventions to meet not only the particular needs of the populations on their territories, but also to acknowledge the potential available within these communities by linking them to the implementation of these measures. This will make it will enable to go beyond these programs, for instance, to go to the local public procurement of these products with our peasant organizations, the small producers, the smaller companies on the territory. This would enable not only to enhance the standard of living of those people who are part of the program, but also the organizations linked to the purchase of food and other products as well as the territories. There's an experience in India where Sane Panda, through a video shared through the seminar, and will be part of FIAN's website, defines how the job of activism and the work of social organizations has been instrumental in India to strengthen the legal framework of the right to food. He highlights regulatory progress in favor of improving the right, that it be enforceable, that transfer programs may be addressed differentially. But he also highlights the fact that they have been able to influence so that the implementation be done as part of an awareness process for the holders of the rights and the mechanisms to demand their rights. They have also included actors such as the police, journalists, policymakers, among others, to sort out the problem of hunger and food insecurity and to move forward with the fulfillment of this right. And he has said that activism should always be present to ensure that what is established in the law is actually enforced. Particularly, he highlighted the work conducted by activists by disclosing government programs, constant oversight to prevent flaws in its implementation. For instance, inadequate localization processes that give rise to discrimination against certain parts of the population or corruption when the figures are increased. And finally, he highlights the importance of accountability and that this be done with relevant mechanisms in line with the unique features of each territory and the population. An example of this is that they not only be done through social media, but that they use different channels that will also allow the government to be closer to the communities. Now I'd like to describe some challenges which I feel are present in relation to transfer programs. First, this one has to do with overcoming the assistance-based approach, which results from the food approach, where the transfer programs are taken as the only measure to tackle hunger without including a clear link to actions based on public offering to reduce unemployment, labor informality, access to land, among others, and thus generating dependency. And at the same time, they don't manage to overcome poverty or the restitution of the ways of living of individuals and their households so that in an autonomous manner they may enjoy their rights, among them the right to food. These measures should be coordinated within a master policy for the right to food with actions that enable meeting the state's obligations to address not only overcoming crisis, but also structural problems that are now responsible for a broad range of violations of this right. The second challenge is that transfer should not generate an action with damage. For instance, that they affect the media, the possibility to survive and population dedicated to this. They should not prevent access or limitation to a nutrition that is culturally appropriate for the population. Some food assistance programs are present, like geared towards the population, including UPPs that give rise to consequences on the health of the population. They purchase these products from large industries, which of course goes against the obligation to protect from the state with respect to third parties that now trade products that are not nutritional, misleading advertising, and negatively affect local economies. Therefore, these programs should purchase fresh food, nutritional food coming from the local production of food to protect our family, community, and rural and ethnic agriculture, as well as acknowledging and respecting the food traditions of the communities on their territories. The third element is to tackle and overcome corruption and clientelism. In the transfer programs and in other programs of social protection, it is known and it has been disclosed in mass media outlets that there is a monopoly of operators responsible for providing food who also purchase products from large large supermarkets, leaving the local producers not with the possibility of not providing this, deteriorating the quality of the standard of living of these people on their territories. Many of these operators are hired under corruption processes with government officials that are bribed. This has been disclosed several times in mass media outlets. Once the operation of these programs is awarded, these operators offer low quality products in quantities which are less than those that were contracted for. And historically, it has been common on several territories that transfer programs have been used as a strategy to buy votes or as a way to oppress by illegal armed groups. To overcome this, most of these programs see people as beneficiaries, where a lot some measures of charity or measures, different measures, which are not seen as objects of they should have the possibility of deciding which transfers are more relevant according to their needs and specific features on their territories, which inputs are required, with what frequency, what is the technical support required, what other structural measures should be part of those transfer systems. So this is fundamental that even in the same processes, they know who are having situations of hunger on their territories. They have the right to control state programs, to get to know and to demand their rights, as the experience mentioned a while ago in India. And I'd like to finish with some reflections on these elements. First, that transfers are a measure that may help tackle hunger in a situation of emergency, but that they should be part of a master policy on the right to food and in other linked public policies that allow them to be coordinated with other medium and long-term measures to address the structural causes of hunger and systematic violations of the right to food in Colombia. These measures should be clearly defined in the transfer programs. Secondly, transfers should not be homogeneous for the whole national territory. It is necessary for them to consider the diverse populations and territories, as these needs are diverse, and therefore the measures should be flexible. They must be adapted according to the ever-changing realities. Thirdly, transfer monetary and income transfer programs should incorporate the gender ethnic approach. They should incorporate and acknowledge other initiatives to tackle hunger, which are now self-managed by the communities to privilege family agriculture communities, agriculture and other large industries for the purchase and distribution of products and materials. And as part of state measures, it should include all of the contributions made by rural and ethnic communities to the diversity, ecologic methods, which are the basis of food sovereignty in our country.
We need to encourage public participation, as I mentioned at the beginning, and this should be in parity conditions within the process to implement and all the measures to fight hunger and to ensure the right to food. And they should be established by the government, including, of course, these transfers. And this should happen at national level and at territory level to enable that they can oversee that the government really meets and fulfills this right. And this work should be linked and done at the same time with other entities. So this concept of people food power this is part of a core aspect to make progress in terms of food security or food sovereignty in the country. So it could be a transformation for the well-being of people, of the life on the planet, and for the planet itself. And this is how I would like to close. So thank you, Angela. Excellent presentation about transfers as measures to fight against hunger in Colombia. So let us continue with Mariana Santarelli. She is a sociologist, coordinator of public policies in FIAN Brazil, coordinator of the Observatory for School Food and Food Security. So the floor is yours, Mariana. She will talk to us about public procurement, local public procurement in favor of food security and food sovereignty in the case of Brazil. So it is a pleasure, Mariana. So the floor is yours. Okay, dear people from FIAN Colombia, it is a pleasure for me to be here with you this afternoon and to be able to share a little bit of what we have in terms of experience in this topic. When I was invited to be part of this panel, I began to think about the relationship between public procurement and the people's power, food power. And then I remember about a very powerful woman that we have met in the works that we've conducted with FIAN and all indigenous population. Her name is Adelina in the Amazon. She is the president of a women's association, Ticuna Association. She lives there very close to the boundary, to the border of Brazil and Colombia. She is the president of association. And for 10, 20 years, they've been selling healthy foods. And recently for school food. So she makes a very explicit differentiation the way she talks. She speaks Portuguese, but not a lot. But she makes a difference between what she calls the food that comes to schools and different to the food of business maps and the food of the mapanas. So the food that comes from the businesses that comes every 3 months to school, and then it just finishes. And it is food. They also have a lot of junk food, and it's food that is not natural, it's not good food. And it's costly, and it finishes very quickly, and it takes time for that food to come to the Amazon because it's very expensive also to bring the food. We're talking about 3 deliveries that they're done every year, so it's very costly. So really the same price that they pay for that food. And what she talks about, the difference of the mood from Mapana, there's the food that she sells in the school. It's a traditional food, fish, traditional foods from the Amazon region that they deliver every 2 months, and that make children happier, according to what she says. And one thing that Adelina says is that we need to have more time, more food from us and less food from businesses. So when I think about the procurement, public procurement, and the people's power, how can we do to really rob all this money that is invested in food for schools so that we can generate popular systems, decentralized local associations of foods produced based on the communities, based on the traditions. And we feel that there are many conditions when there's political will from our governments, we can do this. But of course, we're talking here about a power game or a power juggle. I don't know exactly how Colombia works, but I think it would be similar to Brazil. But we have a set of of schemes, a lot of people that assess on public food. And I will talk to you about now the Brazilian experience. I have a presentation with me, so Alejandro, if you could share my presentation, please. Alejandro, are you there? Could you help me with my presentation? Okay. These are pictures of a study survey we conducted in FIAN, Brazil with Guarani and Kawayo peoples. These are the first pictures of a school that is located in a town, and the other picture, it's the Mapana Association that I was talking to you about. So could you move to the next one, please? So as I was saying, so taking control of public procurement from businesses to sell real food produced by peasants, indigenous communities, and traditional people. This is really the challenge that we face. That's why it's interesting to see how this debate has occurred in Brazil. So the first program that we had in terms of public procurement, it's a procurement of foods. It was a program created in 2023 as of a proposition made by the National Council for Food Security within the scope of this strategy, which is called Zero Hunger. So it was began by the Lula government back in 2013. So they have three great policies. The program Bolsa Familia, it was a transfer of income, a condition, then a procurement of foods. It was the first time that this experience existed within public policy that was related to the SAFRA program on family agriculture, something that is really important. So with the arrival again of Lula government, there has been an important movement, the recognition of the subjects of rights in terms of subjects that require public policy. So a big step was the creation of the category of family agriculture that is now part of a law which determines what family agriculture means. The maximum size of the land that a peasant may have to be considered a family agriculture, how many people in the family may be involved. So with that in mind, we have created a specific subject of rights and a series of public policies intended for this specific subject, which is the family agricultural and family peasant. And so they intended to incentivize family agriculture to have associations linked to selling these foods to people under suffering food rights. And we also have the stock. We can have if maybe someone could help me with the word, it's a stock. When you have a lot of food, that happens when you have so much reserva. So we have the creation of warehouses also, and we've also used these reserves maybe of grains in Brazil. So we have 4 modalities or 4 types of how to acquire or procure food. So with procurement with donation, which is we buy directly from the agriculture, to donate to a popular restaurant, to a solidarity kitchen, or directly to families that are suffering hunger. And it's an association that's managed by the social assistance project. I don't see the presentation anymore. Okay. After that, We have another modality, the one that buys milk, and it's a direct, they buy directly milk. And this is the procurement that is used for this great reserves of food and are made up by different cooperative or associations. Right now, we are in a second stage with a bill that is being passed now. It's being discussed right now in the government, in Congress, which is really defining that all public procurement that have to relate to food from family agricultural family peasants will have to have the same treatment, that 30% of what is bought by a specific public institution should be bought from these family peasants or family agriculture. So it's really building a giant market well beyond of what we could do with the PEA, which is now managed through a specific budget. It's a good budget, of course, but it's not that big. So when we talk about 30%, we should buy from all public procurement to the federal government. In the case of school food, it is quite interesting within this perspective to address public procurement is to have a historic view, a historic analysis, what we call the school program. It's been in place for 70 years, and it began as a humanitarian international aid in most of the countries in Latin America and Africa. And so at the beginning, it was a humanitarian aid made by the USA. And so it was within the external context of the Cold War. So it was used almost as a weapon to find allies. And it was also a way of managing the states. And it was also a way of finding new markets for UPPs or junk food that was being created in the United States. So the Brazilian government did not have a budget at that time. So it was this food that came in powder, and they came to a very small number of schools. So in 1988, we began to build our own federal process. They designed mechanisms to decentralize the Brazilian state. So many of the policies began to be operated by different municipalities. So as of the federal constitution, the federal establishment, we devised a new program for school food with that shared responsibilities within the 3 spheres of government. With that in mind, the municipalities themselves began to buy their own food, do their own procurement. So we went from a process of humanitarian aid coming from abroad to national buyers to procurement that was done this food was bought from large businesses, but in the municipalities. And now the third phase began in 2009 when we had the law of the PNAE, which has established that 30% of everything that is provided by the government, federal government, to the institutes, to municipalities should be bought from family peasants that were within this registry or this cadastral registry that we conducted in previous years. So from 2009, we have a deconcentration of public procurement. So the Brazilian government has a greater number of offerers and we have indigenous population, traditional communities. And so what we see, this is a constant dispute because we coordinated the observatory for school food. And we have a series of bills that try to have market reserves about these huge amounts of budget. We have $1 billion per year, which is the national budget, in addition to the investment budget that comes from the municipalities and different states. So there's always, everybody's always trying to have this market reserves. So 30% of that budget is used in buying milk. That's lobbying from the milk industry, or in meat. That's also a lobbying attitude. Or so it's a constant struggle from us, for us, so that the program could follow their own guidelines that relate to the right to local food and the right to access to local food. We also see a trend in terms of association or cooperatives. So it is very important to always have provide technical assistance, so that those that are peasants, that are the more vulnerable population, young people, indigenous communities, women, they can have access to this public policy that is so important for them. So their relationship with other public policies to strengthen family agriculture, it's vital, so that the program may reach peasants, and not to continue this trend, which is natural that is quite natural of the market, which is always trying to concentrate large amounts from large businesses. And that could happen. I think, just to have an overview of the program, we service more or less 40 million students around Brazil. We are present in the over 5,000 municipalities in the country, so it's quite complex in terms of management. Therefore, that's why we have the need for a national body to define guidelines. The federal government, they want to decentralize the budget to the municipalities based on the number of students, but it's also a commitment from the municipalities and local governments to complement or supplement this investment, which is still not enough to ensure quality food for schools. So the guidelines of the IPNITE's healthy and adequate food, respecting tradition, culture, healthy foods, the inclusion of food education and nutritional, the universality. So the 40 million of students, they have the right to healthy food, the participation of the community to receive money from the national program. The municipalities, they have to have a council of for food, school food, which is organized with representatives of parents, civil society, teachers. They have the responsibility to be accountable and to monitor the program at local level. And then the main motivation, which is this mandatory, that 30% of that budget should be brought to peasants, to traditional communities, indigenous communities, and people affected by the agrarian reform. So it has also a very strong component in linking public policies implemented and agricultural policies that have been implemented in the government to that end. Something that is quite interesting from the perspective of traditional communities or grassroots communities and indigenous communities. For these people, one of the difficulties that they have always faced is all the sanitary certifications that has nothing to do with their natural or their customary habits so we have a huge network of prosecutors or controllers that have understood that in the cases of traditional communities or grassroots, school food is considered as own consumption. So there is no need for them to have all those sanitary certifications and to fill out all those criteria in terms of how foods are prepared and preserved. So in this way, it is possible to have dry fish or fruits that are traditionally transformed into flour, so they could be sold to the program without the necessary certifications. So this is a new innovation, which has opened, of course, a series of paths to enable and facilitate public procurement. I'm just going to show you now some photographs, so some pictures, so you can be inspired. These are pictures of there's a woman community, Chikuna woman community. These are women from the Mapana community. This is Adelina, the president of the association, which is a very forceful woman, a warrior. She has made a difference in the entire Amazon region. These are the children. And these are pictures from the Guarani and Guayaba peoples. And in this town, they're not really buying yet from family. We were there, we had a diagnosis. We're working together with them so that they can begin to sell. And so we have that expectation that they will be able to sell mandioca and other products that are produced in the community. So this is so in Brazil, in FIAN Brazil, we are very committed to school food, especially we're working together with grassroots organizations and indigenous communities. So we have great expectations that we can make progress in this regard, because what we need to think also about how to face challenges within public policies, because there is institutional racism from public officials. And we need to consider this in addition to the lack of experience and the problem in the design of public policy to manage specificities of these other people. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. You are moving forward and we are just starting regarding this, so it is very, very timely. We would like to continue with Rubén Orjuela, Director of Nutrition at the ICBF, the Colombian Welfare Institute, nutritionist from the National University, Director of Nutrition at ICBF, an advisor on nutrition for civil society organizations as Educar Consumidores, Red Papás, and the National Indigenous Organization in Colombia, ONIC, a volunteer of the FIAN Network. He will speak about the role of ICBF in the transformations required to fight against malnutrition and hunger. Ruben, it's a pleasure to see you again. The floor is yours. Thank you, Professor Gustavo. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so very much to FIAN Colombia for the kind invitation. From ICBF, we are ready to work with civil society in everything that has to do with food and nutrition. I am going to ask Alejandro to please share the presentation on the screen. Thank you. Next one, please. As had been announced on the agenda earlier, what I intend to do today is to tell you a bit about the role of ICBF and the transformations required to fight against hunger and malnutrition. And I wanted to tell you what the nutrition division does within ICBF. This presentation is not intended to do what perhaps is used to be done by institutions, which is to show all of the services we offer, because in fact, it is available, but rather to tell you within the framework of what we offer and within our mission, what are we thinking about doing and what have we planned, in fact, to fight against hunger and malnutrition. To contextualize I'd like to tell you that the nutrition division within ICBF leads the implementation of policies, plans, programs, and projects related to nutrition established by the Prosperidad Social Group and other competent institutions within the function given to us by Article 37 of Decree 1987 of 2012. The main functions, because of course we have several functions, include, first of all, to implement under the modalities and services of nutrition, all of the modalities and services for nutrition within ICBF. They all contain a food component. So the nutrition division has to guide that food component included in all of the missions of our institution. For those of you who are unaware of what ICBF does, we have 6 missions, which is the protection direction, early childhood direction, adolescence group, and the division that works with nutrition. And as part of these functions, we have included the food component. We also cross-cut all of the different missions of ICBF and everything that pertains to nutrition and food, because we guide everything that has to do with food, and we also guide the food policy and the nutrition policy within the missions of ICBF. In other words, we have programs and services that not only provide food, but that also involve an education component, as well as a component that has to do with food production. So we provide guidance from a political standpoint on how we should go about education and food production. Just to give you an example, our third big function is to be a benchmark on the policy related to the human right to food and everything that pertains to food and nutrition tools that I will describe later on. So I would like to share what we intend to do in this new government. The president and the general director of ICBF, Dr. Astrideliana Cáceres, has instructed us, first of all, as an institute, to focus on, rather, to have a human rights-based approach, so that planning and our actions in the past, which were more in line with meeting social targets and meeting the budget, more in using a different approach. What we intend to do now is to work on the basis of human rights. In other words, not only thinking about providing certain food packages, but the intervention that we intend to carry out should truly have a positive impact on guaranteeing the rights of individuals. In this sense, for instance, the ICBF, despite the fact that it is not part of its mission, it is starting to provide water, to give water to some communities and in specific zones of La Guajira province where there is no water. It is not part of our mission, but it is part of the fundamental right of peoples and individuals to hydrate themselves to food and to health and life. So ICBF is putting an additional effort into providing water to these communities and to making a contribution. And this is just an example on how we are thinking about transforming the institute and what we do, and to focus more on rights. And these rights are not only the rights of children that we are tending to, who are our users, but also thinking about how we can guarantee the rights of the rest of the family, to be able to guarantee as well the rights of boys and girls. The other approach from the nutrition division is the transformation of the human right to food, which is part of the National Development Plan. We have a transformative pillar where ICBF has great responsibility. Of course, these responsibilities fall upon the Nutrition Directorate. From there, we would like to enforce the National Development Plan and be able to have a positive contribution to the progressive guarantee of the human right to food. We also have another approach, which is the one engaged in transforming contracting historically conducted by ICBF, which perhaps call for an adjustment to be able to strengthen community processes, to strengthen civil society, and to be able to strengthen partnerships. That's what the government has called popular and public alliances or partnerships. We are hoping to transform contracting efforts. We again would like to revisit and retake the control over our services because for some time the Institute has put this in the hand of its operators, and it has not been what we expected. So the ICBF would like to retake that role, that control over these programs. And also something that we would like to implement is to agree with the communities, not only on the service, but also to with whom we will be contracting. And that this be accepted by indigenous peoples. These transformations, in our view, contribute positively to guaranteeing rights, not only the right to food, but other rights that the different communities are entitled to. Regarding the role taken on by ICBF, especially the Nutrition Directorate, as I said at the beginning of my presentation, the Nutrition Directorate is based on the National Development Plan. As I mentioned earlier, we have a transformative pillar or axis that we are responsible for to a very large extent. As part of this area, we not only work on the basis of the National Development Plan, but also on the basis of everything that has to do with the roadmap for food systems, the roadmap designed by the country and presented in 2021. We are designing it, bearing in mind the strategic commitments from this new government, including some differences in relation to the initial roadmap. From the Nutrition Directorate and from ICBF, we also have to do with some bills of law related to the human right to food. And we are also working strongly on the Peace Accord plans, which is a rural plan for the progressive enforcement of the human right to food. What is the commitment or the approach we have wanted to adopt? We have wanted to adopt a food sovereignty approach, human right to food. We would like to work strongly from the institutions on everything that has to do with the classification of the NOVA classification geared towards food policies. Now, in relation to the tools that I mentioned earlier. They are essentially the Colombian food makeup table, the food balance data sheet, and the nutrient and energy intake. These are the tools ICBF uses. We manage them, and this is what we use for planning and for everything else. And they are used to guide and to be able to influence public policies that have to do with nutrition and food. With respect to the education and communication strategy, we have foreseen modifications that will allow us to enter into a genuine dialogue, as was given by the Constitutional Court in one of its decisions. We'd like to somehow change the knowledge transfer model, moving more towards a dialogue of knowledge, a dialogue with communications, a joint effort on how healthy food should be about. This will allow us to grow at a country level and also as an institution. So this is the goal regarding education and communications. Regarding breastfeeding, as the national plan has established, we'd like to sponsor the enforcement of the marketing program. We have been working in our country on everything that has to do with the benefits derived from breastfeeding. However, the rates have gone down. So, taking into account scientific evidence, for instance, the Lancet information from this year, where they speak about the commercial influence on childhood commercial food, on the low rates of maternal breastfeeding programs, we will be implementing this approach to give much more strength to what we have been doing, but also to start this new way of working, new at least from our institution, given that the ICBF Institute has not been historically strong regarding the code. Now the idea would be to strengthen it, and from ICBF, from its services and from its scope, to be able to foster the promotion to maternal breastfeeding programs, adding many more components. We have another very important area, which is our food planning area. It's called minutes in some areas. In this area, we will be introducing changes which I feel may have a very positive impact on everything that has to do with food sovereignty, public purchases of food products, and territorialization of minutes, food guidelines. Why? Well, because first of all, we are thinking about changing the approach on how we go about food planning. We'd like to work more with the territories, with food territories. We would like to work more on the food needs more than on calorie and nutrient intake needs. We would like to work more on agreement with communities. We would like to enhance our technical data sheets to make it possible for public procurement to be a reality. At this point, ICBF has technical data sheets that have to be reviewed to enable the participation of more sectors of society involved with the production of food, who are based on the territories. So we are now starting this review. We would also like to give the opportunity to more smaller producers to be able to participate with the Institute by providing food in the regions. We feel that the Institute has a resource and a financial muscle to purchase food products. So for the nutrition division, we think we can contribute with these tools so that these local producers, these local products may be purchased. This is what we are hoping to do. It is not easy. I can tell you that I'm sharing many of the dreams and many of our aspirations from the nutritional directorate, but they have yet to be developed more. We are working on this and we will continue to move forward with this dream. Regarding the strategy on slowing down malnutrition, I'd like to tell you that ICBF is working on an article that we included in the National Development Plan, which is called the Nutritional Recovery Zones. These are some spaces where we are not only hoping to focus on individuals, in this case, boys and girls, but also on families in relation to high nutritional value food products. We'd like to contribute to food sovereignty in these zones and to contribute to public procurement with the development of new products which include local raw materials involving local production, and not what's happening now where most of our raw materials for the product called bienestarina are being imported. So we are looking into other options with escojillo, a legume that grows in the desert. And on the last slide, and this is to finish my presentation, these are our current commitments. What we are hoping to do, we're thinking about nutritional recovery zones that I shared already. We will have not only ICBF, but health and education working there. We'd like to involve agriculture, housing, the different ministries in those nutritional recovery zone. We'd like to retake control over everything that has to do with services offered by ICBF, and more than retaking a control, the ICBF in any case has control over its services. Rather, it is about, again, involving them in the whole chain and working closer with people. This is what ICBF intends to do with this, and thus to be able to interact directly with the communities. And definitely something that is of the utmost importance is to reduce malnutrition. At this point, you are very much focused on everything that pertains to slowing down malnutrition and deaths because of malnutrition. Of course, we have to pay attention to this as much as we can, but we have not forgotten our responsibility in relation to overweight and the problem brought about by overweight as well. It is not a minor issue. This is also something that we hope to do. However, you must understand that the priority is to halt the deaths because of malnutrition. We cannot put up with this. Children dying because of malnutrition in the second most biodiverse country around the world. So this is something that doesn't come easy. With this, I would like to finish my presentation. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share this contribution that ICBF is currently working on to contribute to fighting against malnutrition. And later on, I'll wait to hear your questions or observations. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ruben. Thanks for your presentation. It's a pleasure to hear that ICBF is thinking about adopting a human rights-based approach with a binding tone. Thank you so very much. Later on, we will take questions related to your presentation. Now I'd like to welcome Jolis Correa, who represents the zone of Rural Reserve. She's a human rights advocate, and she works towards the acknowledgement of the rights of rural communities in Colombia, executive director of Zona Reserva Campesina organization in Montes de Maria, and she's a member of the board of directors of this association. She will be speaking about the power of from peasants and rural communities. Jolis, it's a pleasure to welcome you to this seminar. Please let us know if you are able to speak at this point, if you are able to continue with your presentation. I believe she's not here. Apparently not. She must be having technical problems. Perhaps then, to make time while we wait for Jolis to join the call, we can take some questions. Please help me with the questions we have received from the audience. All right, so we have a question here. Yes, I'm getting some questions. Okay, so well, we have one question. I suppose it's for Marcela, but I'm sorry. Give me a minute. I suppose it's for Mariana. The question is, Mariana, Brazil underwent a process, economically speaking, with a very strong emphasis on the agri-industry. What is the place now for communities to preserve their own systems compared to what seems to be a development-based agenda, which has been historical in Brazil? That's a question for you, Mariana. There's another one. Should I ask it before you answer? Do you feel that, no, that's for Marcela. Sorry, no, this is for the first speaker. Do you feel that transfers, especially monetary transfers, should also foster resource flow mechanisms, for instance, popular banks to minimize a greater wealth for the financial sector, responsible for many of the problems in the country? We can start with Mariana with the first question, and then Marcela can take her question. We do have a serious problem in Brazil, and I think as well in Colombia, which is the conflict between the different food systems that have more to do with the production of food commodities, especially for export purposes, against food systems that are there organized to produce real food. Increasingly, we are losing territory for agribusiness purposes. This is a contradiction in Brazil. We fight against this all the time. In this government, we are now creating two very important things, which is reconstructing the Ministry of Agricultural Development, the one that historically has been responsible for family agriculture, from an interpretation that indicates that we're losing our own food sovereignty, increasingly the land devoted to produce beans or rice, which are the basic food culture in Brazil, are being lost. So the perspective for this ministry is to go back to supply policy with mechanisms devoted to real food production. This means to redirect agricultural credit, to retake the policies that have to do with agricultural reform, as many other initiatives that have to do with specifically looking into the production of food for domestic consumption. This doesn't come easy when we talk about indigenous peoples. And we are very close to the practices, the Guarani, Kiowa, communities in Mato Grosso, where they are increasingly being confined on their territories, and they are also being brought into their own production systems, for instance, soybean. So that we have identified this conflict. We think that public procurement would be a way to sort this out, because alternatives have to be introduced so that people decide to remain in the countryside, in the rural areas. They must have market alternatives so that they have a place to sell their own production. In the Guarani Kiowa territory, we want to prove that it is possible to do this, that people can go back to their own food production strategies, not only for their own survival, but also because they will be able to market their products. We know that it is a dream, a utopia, because the land, for instance, the Guarani Kiowa communities, they don't have the same land to produce just for their own survival, but for their own livelihood, but it is possible elsewhere. So the reality in Brazil is very different. We have family agriculture initiatives that have 1 hectare, but we also have family agriculture that have much more land. And today they survive on selling the products. They, for instance, for school food programs, that's one of the main ways they have to create a family income initiative. It is a reality that we need to preserve and expand. In addition to all of the other contradictions added to the living conditions of these communities on their own territories. Thank you very much. This is very interesting. We have 3 questions for Angela, and but Jolis, our 4th guest speaker, has joined the call. So I'm going to check and see if she's here, if she can hear us, to continue with her presentation. Jolis, are you here? Can you hear us, Jolis? I think she's having technical problems. Jolis, can you hear me? Please let me know once she joins the call. Let's continue with the questions. If you agree, I'm going to ask a question to Ruben, but I'm going to read them all so that you can start thinking about the answers. Ruben, what do you think are the challenges to be able to structure the nutritional recovery zone so that they contribute to the food governance sector and that they are not limited only to one focalized action? I'm going to read the 3 questions for Ruben. Sorry, for Angela. Jolix is here apparently. Hello, can you hear me? Jolix, yes, I'm here. Hello, how are you? So how are you? Sorry. I'm doing well. Can you give me 3 minutes? Yes, of course. Sorry. So could you please start by answering that first question for you, Ruben? Yes, of course. This is a very complex question. First of all, the nutritional recovery zones are a unique commitment. It is something that is novel. The first challenge we have that we are sorting out with the planning department, the Ministry of Health, and the ICBF. I think we will have to add some other institutions to try to limit those zones at the beginning and to be able to know what size they have, what is their jurisdiction, and who will define them, where they start and where they end. And also what we will be able to include in those zones. we cannot carry out actions that lead to damages. So we need not only to work with some state institutions, but also we need acceptance from the community and from the population living in those areas. We cannot go there and carry out actions that perhaps may go against the uses and the customs if we're talking about indigenous communities or Afro-descendant communities or Roma communities. So we have many challenges. Also, being able to accomplish something we're trying to overcome, which is not having one simple stock of institutional offerings, but rather that what we offer works in coordination with other institutions, not that we add actions that are not necessarily for
las entidades que hacemos compra de alimentos. Entonces, los desafíos son muchos, sinceramente, hay que reconocerlos, son bastantes los desafíos, pero pues bueno, estamos para tratar de superarlos y poder hacer una...
Bueno, agradecerles este tiempo que nos han acompañado. Seguimos en este cuarto seminario internacional de FIAN Colombia, Poder Popular Alimentario, Soberanía Alimentaria y Derecho a la Alimentación. Hemos tenido un grupo de panelistas, expositores que nos han estado acompañando en esta mañana. Hemos tenido desde las experiencias de la institucionalidad, la presentación que nos hacían desde la FAO, y hace unos instantes estaba hablando precisamente el director de nutrición, Rubén Orjuela. También hemos tenido experiencias que nos muestran cómo efectivamente desde las luchas populares, los espacios en los que las comunidades ejercen su trabajo, su activismo, vemos cómo se materializa también el poder popular alimentario. Vemos a las compañeras de la ciudad de Barranca que nos estaban contando sobre ese camino que han recorrido en el marco también de tener el primer consejo comunitario de mujeres campesinas y rurales en la ciudad de Barranca y esa participación en el campo también de la política. Nos venían también contando los compañeros de FIAN Colombia efectivamente a qué se refiere este enfoque, este concepto del poder popular alimentario, y nos traían a este escenario una conversación acerca de cómo es esa posibilidad de una acción política que está configurada en el marco de la garantía del derecho a la alimentación y la soberanía alimentaria, que empieza como una clara conciencia de la necesidad de transformar esas estructuras de todo tipo, ¿no? Estructuras sociales, estructuras políticas, las mismas estructuras institucionales que han hecho posible esta gobernanza alimentaria de un modo de tipo corporativo, que desde FIAN Colombia siempre hemos reclamado como un modelo que va en contra y que es claramente violador de derechos humanos, en este caso el derecho a la alimentación. Bueno, estamos retomando, parece ya los asuntos técnicos se están solucionando. ¿Me escucha, profesor Gustavo Cedil?
Sí, aquí estoy. ¿Cómo está? Muy bien.
Adelante, profesor.
Al parecer, Rubén terminó su intervención. Seguro me perdí un poco. Finalmente terminó y ya tenemos aquí a Yolis Correa. Rubén, ¿terminaste tu intervención?
Así es, así es. Estaba diciendo para finalizar que los desafíos son muchos y que, pues bueno, para eso estamos trabajando fuertemente desde el instituto y de las otras entidades de la CISAN para tratar de superar esas barreras, esos desafíos y poder llevar esta propuesta a feliz término y pues sobre todo lograr lo que queremos, que son impactos positivos en la población. Entonces ya con esto termino, profesor Gustavo.
Muchas gracias, Rubén. Bueno, tenemos a Yolis Correa, ya la habíamos presentado. Tengo entendido que ya está aquí conectada de las zonas de reserva campesina. Yolis, tienes el micrófono para ti. Para la profe Ángela tenemos unas preguntas, así que, bueno, después de que hable Yolis, las presentamos de nuevo. Por favor.
Buenas
Yolis.
tardes para todos y todas, ¿cómo están?
Muy bien.
Bueno, presentar mis excusas, pues se me presentó un inconveniente, un vuelo retrasado, que apenas me bajo, pero bueno, dispuesta acá a entrar a este espacio, aprovechar estos pequeños minutos para expresarles a ustedes, pues, qué es la ANSOR y cómo nosotras y nosotros vamos construyendo una propuesta dentro de nuestras territorialidades de lo que es el poder campesino alrededor de una alimentación sana. Voy a apagar la cámara porque tengo un poquito aquí de audio que se me baja por datos. Entonces, me disculpan. Bueno.
Claro que sí.
Ok. Bueno, contarle primeramente que ANSOR es la Asociación Nacional de Zonas de Reserva Campesina en Colombia y que de inicio en el 2000, alrededor de los años del año 2000, era iniciar precisamente un camino diferente, un camino donde se promocionaran territorialidades campesinas, netamente campesinas, pero que no pasaran por encima de las otras figuras de ordenamiento territorial, con el fin de buscar precisamente eso que nosotras y nosotros llamamos la territorialidad campesina, pero con la definición o con el acertijo, la aceptación, perdón, de que tenemos que construir un camino libre de violencias, pero también ese camino libre de violencias implica que tengamos que tener una alimentación sana en nuestras territorialidades, ¿sí? Eso suena un poco complejo.
So I know it sounds complex, and it is. I know you're probably thinking, what do you mean? What are you talking about? So ANSOR, in our vision, we want to be acknowledged as a peasant movement that defends the rights, access to land, gender equality, access to the territory, and community governance in the different Colombian territories. So although I may sound redundant, but we are in 22 departments with 82 processes. And out of those 82 processes, they are making great efforts and taking great strides so that peasant community and the knowledge of women around peasant. Can you hear me? Yes.
Okay, gracias.
Sí, Yoli, se está escuchando.
Listo, perfecto. Gracias. ANSOR tiene en su...
So ANSOR, in their plan, we have 5 strategic lines. The first one has to do with agrarian reform. The second, the peasant reserve zones. The third one is peasant feminism and the empowerment of peasant women. And then peasant economy for food security. And then the aspect of political aspect for peasant women. This is really what I've talked about. But what it really means, I will explain what it really means. So as I said, within these 5 strategic lines, we have the peasant empowerment of women in their own territories, that they advocate for their own food sovereignty and the right to food. based also on Article 65 of the Colombian Constitution and everything that it entails in terms of trying to find the different ways of having territory participation that is assertive and to have governance in our territory to the extent possible, so that food is a pillar of that governance. So especially we're talking about healthy food. So the collective work of peasant women providing the well-being for the territory and the women who live there, the families, the communities, this is vital to for the development of life, food sovereignty, to overcome hunger in peasant areas, to build community power, popular power around food. And that's how we have become well, we have made this effort of preserving native seeds, clean seeds, and to make known the power of woman and the caring of woman in terms of caring for the territory. So there's peasant reserve areas or zones, and somebody asked me about, what do you mean by popular power around the peasants and about popular food power? Yes, I think that one of the great powers around the world should be around food, and whoever produces food, they have to have a special place within the economy, and this will be the power that stems from the masses. Maybe I'm a bit nervous because first of all, I lost, I couldn't hear the previous lectures or talks, but what we would like to achieve through ANSORC, more than a land planning setting or in believing that we are a different way of governing or having an independent republic, we really want to talk about governance through preserving food. We work daily on the need for the peasant to be acknowledged as a subject, a political subject, and he or she, they produce foods and they give the livelihood. They take food to everyone in the planet. So governance, public power in the areas of peasants reserved areas. It's linked also to what peasants produce in a clean manner. And we want to make this valid. We want to make this. We are a bit concerned when the food that is clean, that is organic, they have to have so many requirements to be acknowledged. When we sell it here in the countryside, we see that people ask so many questions. But when they come to a market, because we sometimes do not trust, we really ask the question, is this really a clean? And that's what large companies, that's the question that large companies ask when they're selling fries and they're saying that it's free from trans food. So maybe from the land it came out clean, but when they packaged it, they add things that are not natural. So what is not, it's surplus of fats and salts. So we ask everyone, we urge everyone to consume the foods produced by our peasants, because sometimes they tell us that to have a license about a territory where we produce organic food, they would have to go through a 5-year process free from chemicals, and we need to show that. So for us, those are costly processes. So it is important that the word of the peasant is believed when he says or she says that we're producing something that is healthy, that it's clean, that they should be acknowledged as such. Also, native seeds give life. We can say today that the production of those native seeds, it's limited because we have so many transgenic seeds and they're undervalued. They're only valued within our territories, within our own communities. So I would think that governance around food is exactly what it means, as that the peasant should be considered that his or her production is clean, and that also they take into account his effort or her effort, that we need to have some pedagogy in educational institutions and also in school centers and school institutions and community homes around the country. Because, you know, when they give a child in our own territory some lunch with a fruit on a little box where we have the crops of mango, and we give the children, we see some trucks with trucks buying our own production. They buy it quite cheap and they bring it in UPPs. So I think we should go about with some pedagogy, and please let me excuse myself for not having listened to the previous presentations, but we need to work with the peasant reserve areas and also with the different figures or instances proposed by all instances and entities. I hope I have been clear and concrete. I hope my intervention has been well understood. And again, apologies for being late. I wanted to have a good connection and to make my intervention as clear as possible. Jolie, thank you very much. We understood perfectly well the message that you wanted to convey, which is a strong message. And it's also a very important message for us and everything that has to do with the people's food power. This is really what we're trying to do here. So let us move to the Q&A session, and we could be wrapping up the session. So again, Jolly, thank you for the effort of being with us today. Thank you very much to everyone. And thank you for lending your ear to listen to our own proposals in terms of governance regarding food sovereignty. Thank you, Jolie. We have a question for Angela. Angela, are you there? Do you believe that those transfers, monetary transfers, should also be driving mechanisms to ease the flow of resources, especially popular banks, and especially for the financial institutions who are responsible for so many of the problems that we face? I'm not an expert in the financial sector, but I think that has been a commitment expressed by the government in taking into account popular economy, solidarity, to implement government programs. I think there is a strength in the territory that could be further strengthened, but we have organizations with own resources or with oversight and control processes. They could be part of the implementation, not only of monetary transfers, but also of transfers in kind. I think this is a gradual process of working together with the government and popular economy. And we require to have the political will to strengthen the popular economy. For example, today, public procurement is quite slow due to the amount of requirements that could not be met by the different social organizations. Thank you. We have a question for Jolis. Are you there, Jolis? What is your rapprochement to the current agricultural ministry vis-a-vis the agenda of ANSCOR? Do you believe you have had an open dialogue, or it has been difficult to coordinate? Right now, ANSCOR is part of one of the voices of the national peasant community, and that enable us to approach not only the agricultural ministry, but other ministries as well. Even the cultural ministry, which they are developing cultural peasant culture. We are talking that it's not only about cultural aspect, we have to make a difference or differentiate the cultural aspect, because being a peasant is part of an identity. It's not a culture, it's part of being acknowledged. And what we do around education, that what makes us have the people's power. So in this new period of the new administration, it has been easier, and this approach has been maybe more assertive, because I think they are more willing to come together. We do have an agenda to work on. We will have a national instance in the first week of July, where we would like not only to have a dialogue with ANSORC, but with other peasant organizations in the country, and to talk about the need of giving a special attention to this peasant economy. And I talk about women, but we have a space with the woman coordination team, and everything has to be equal. We don't want just to have a woman and a man, but also the woman should be considered equally as men. So we do have this new approach, this approach, and we hope that it continues in this way, so we can build and implement public policies around peasant organizations, but something that could be effective. Thank you, Jolis. I think we are close to, we just almost completing our session of today. I'm going to summarize a little bit of what we did. Doctora Angela, she talked about the transfers within the National Development Plan 2022-2023. We know these are measures of public protection, temporary protection mechanisms, and that they should have a human rights approach. Now we need active social participation in the implementation and its follow-up, and they should be coordinated with other long-term and medium-term to really address hunger causes in Colombia. And the second part, our second guest, was the popular power and public procurement, thinking about decentralizing the way in which foods are acquired. Brazil has thought about this, but they face a series of players that have access to public resources, something that happens also in our reality here in Colombia. And Mariana also talked about that in the first program for the procurement of food was key to create this family agricultural frame within the Brazilian legislation, which is a key for the fight against hunger. So something we should copy in Colombia. Ruben from the ICBF, he talks about all the transformation that the ICBF would like to implement with a human rights approach, with a series of tools, mechanisms, strategies at the avant-garde, and related to what evidence has shown in terms of food, classification of foods, etc., and with a binding focus for communities. This is something that we've talked about, this people's power that is present in every presentation. And now, Yolisa, you are the representation of popular power. You talk about ANSORC, Association of Peasant Reserve Areas, that outside of as of the year 2020, they have gender focus, but trying to build a path free from violence. It implies healthy food from their own territories, having 5 strategic lines in place, which she defined, defending, advocating for food sovereignty and food security, something that we've talked about. So having said this, we here complete our second session of the day. So thank you, FIAN, for providing this space, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you, Gustavo Cediel. We would like to close this first day of our fourth, so sharing this. This is the popular nutritional power, where people are able to have a nutritional, and we could use resources and experiences to defend the right to food sovereignty, and which is also a pillar for the transformation of this institutional and participative architecture that has been proposed again by the corporate world. So we make a call to the government to really have a democratic architecture in the decision-making process regarding food. In the case of Brazil, we were able to see how they have they have strategies in place to address hunger related to agro-food systems. They have made changes to fiscal policies, and the chamber, the nutritional chamber, how they have worked with civil society, how they met with them to provide participation and to overcome the fight against the hunger they face on social protection, having previous experiences such as zero hunger and the environmental crisis. So we see how this horizon tries to give back the control of foods to those subjects of rights, to peasant leaders. And they shared with us how from the peasant movement and the peasant society, they are pioneers in working with pioneers in food sovereignty processes in the country. In Colombia, we talked about how we work with transferences together with a balance of how these transferences, these are models for social construction. They provide a swift solution, and this implies a social participation at national level and territorial level. That active social participation is required with the design or implementation of transfers, allowing to transcend that individual view to make something more productive. Although monetary transferences are in place to combat hunger, but we should implement long-term and medium-term policies. From FIAN Brazil, we talked about the people's power and having decentralized measures to acquire and procure food, for having adequate food. Brazil has considered this aspect. They face challenges from all those who have access to public resources. They talked about family agriculture, which has enabled the local protection in the fight against hunger. In the presentation by the director of the ICBF, he talked about the role of this institution in the fight against hunger, and how to, of course, keep the rights of children, take into account the rights of infants, children, and families. They have now a human rights approach and prioritizes the right to food and the right, and they have, so our Jolis from the Peasant Association talked about the peasant movement in Colombia. That's a movement to build a path free from violence, and considering the territorial aspect of each community, they can control their own food process to be acknowledged as subjects of rights and political actors or political players. And they talk about the needs of having food governance to grant the power. So a true governance based on the power of these peasant communities. So thank you very much. Thank you to our panel members, facilitators, and everyone that has been with us today in this, our fourth international seminar, FIAN Colombia, for the people, food power, for food security and food sovereignty. So goodbye, and we will meet again tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning. And please, you could follow in our Facebook and YouTube channels. Thank you. And have a great day.